of humans at White Sands Park in New Mexico that are between 21 and 23,000 years old. The new discoveries really challenge the theory that humans traveled over a land bridge from Asia to North America, because that happened several thousands of years after these tracks were made. The scientists who published the findings say these footprints are now the earliest evidence of humans here on this continent. Linz?
There you go, White Sands, full of memories. Thanks, Vicky. Also, NBC News platforms, we've been hearing stories from our series, The Climate Challenge. And this morning, we're taking a closer look at a water crisis in Utah. Utah grew about 18.4% over the last decade, making it the fastest growing state in the nation, according to the 2020 census. But all this growth comes in the middle of a mega drought, and it's pushing the limits of what's possible. NBC News correspondent Cal Perry reports.
The tiny frontier town of Oakley, Utah has never experienced a drought like this. Not since Wade Wollstonhue has been mayor, nor while his father Ken was mayor for that matter. Running this town has been a family business for generations. Now, after hearing complaints at a town hall meeting, the mayor is having to sacrifice potential future residents to protect his current ones.
If you guys are so low on water all the time, why are you continuing to issue building permits? And so when that issue come to the city council with Governor Cox's mandate to use less water, we felt it was a good time to issue a moratorium on building.
The town of Hennifer, 30 miles to the south, is on its way to more stringent restrictions, but is starting as most towns do, trying to define what qualifies as unnecessary.
We have a moratorium in place. This moratorium is that no one can hook onto our culinary water system. That was put in place on May of 2018, and it is in place till today.
Governor Cox declared a state of emergency in March, but conditions have only been getting worse recently, especially over the past years. Currently, 100% of the state is classified as in a, quote, severe drought, affecting some 2.8 million people. Both Hennifer and Oakley depend on water from the Echo and Rockport reservoirs, now operating at dangerously low levels, 15% and 27% respectively.
Drought is considered a slow, kind of creeping disaster, and so we don't always know when it exactly starts or when it exactly ends, but we'll feel the effects of the drought for years.
For Oakley, Utah, it's a disaster with multiple fronts.
Oakley's been battling water for a little while, and we have a lot of issues with just keeping up with the town in general. So being drier than normal and things like that, we have really bad fire conditions, and it's really not a matter of if, it's just when the fires come. And for us, we have to be able to protect people's homes.
It's up to Dallas Hansen every day to make the calculation. Is the city conserving enough water to fight inevitable climate fire while also ensuring enough water is available for daily use?
So we could save their homes and fight fires, and they can also take a shower or flush the toilet in the morning. So,
while residents, mayors, and experts all agree this is the worst drought they've ever seen, many are still hesitant to attribute it to climate change.
I don't think that our world is going to end in 12 years if we don't do this and do that. I think that has become very political. And I think it's a movement to control people.
When they start talking about climate change and all that kind of crap, they forget that there's a God, and he's kind of in control of this, and he kind of has the power to do whatever he wants, whatever we need. I guess if we need humbling, I guess he sends a drought. I don't know how that all works.
While the debates over how we got here drag on, towns like Oakley don't have the luxury of time, faced instead with real decisions about how to preserve life here in a climate now changed.
We're in the second dry state in the union, and we live in a desert, and these people have built little oases all around the desert. And the fact of the matter is there's just not a lot of water here. And now we're getting to everybody's rushing to Utah, and it's the fastest growing state, and we don't really have the surface water for people, and that's what we're running into.
Because the mega drought has had such a profound impact, very real cuts are on the way. The federal government has declared a, quote, water shortage along the Colorado River, which means starting January 1st, states like Arizona and Nevada will have to start to cut the amount of water they take from the river.
A really eye-opening report there. Well, coming up, some flight attendants are fed up with dealing with unruly passengers in the sky.
So much so they're taking their fight to Congress. We'll explain next.
Still to come on the Channel 2 News. Well, the waters are certainly receding now. Still too close to call. Westerholt reporting from ground zero, as it's being referred to. It is, in fact, the Haitian freedom. The Haitian people know a little something about resiliency. What's the biggest risk right now? Some of the troops who have been brought. I want to welcome you to the first presidential debate. In fact, we've been told we can't go any farther. You with some resilient folks. Let me get ahead.
Today is now a podcast.
We have what you need to start your day, and it's available every day.
Your daily dose of news and interviews. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
Sometimes the news can be difficult and overwhelming for kids to understand.
Will coronavirus come back next year?
So to help make sense of it all, we've created a newscast just for them. And you know a lot. We hope your family will watch Nightly News Kids Edition.
News is more than a headline. It informs, it inspires, and it still matters. To cover it, you have to be in it. And that's what we're going to do. Every night, we take you to the front lines of the story, where it's actually happening, with NBC News journalists on the ground from all over the world. We cover what you need to know and bring your newsfeed to life. In prime time and streaming live, it's your news playlist every night.
Top Story with Tom Llamas. Weeknights at 7 on NBC News Now.
It was a wealthy, idyllic town forced to confront racism, but when the school board presented its plan, it ignited a national firestorm.
Critical race theory.
False narrative.
This is South Lake. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
It's time for our CNBC Money Minute, the biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you. CNBC's Christina Parts-Nevelis joins us now. Good morning, Christina.
Good morning. Let's start with the iPhone. The iPhone 13 officially goes on sale today. People are already lining up across the country. Most tech reviewers say the new models are just an incremental upgrade over the iPhone 12 with an improved camera and battery life. But analysts say early demand has looked positive, with pre-orders running about 20% ahead of the iPhone 12 last year. The iPhone 13 mini starts at $699, while the base iPhone 13 is $799, and that's $799. And the 13 Pro starts at $999. And last but not least, the Pro Max is $1,099. Twitter will now let people tip their favorite content creators with Bitcoin. This comes just 4 months after the company launched its tip jar feature. With the new update, users all over the world will have access to tipping, allowing them to send each other cash through apps such as Venmo and Cash App. Twitter won't take a cut of tips exchanged between users. My Twitter handle is @ChristinaParts. Switching gears, America's 400 richest families pay a lower tax rate than the average taxpayer. That's according to a White House report released yesterday. The wealthiest families pay an average rate of 8.2%, while most Americans pay an average of just over 13% of their income. That's due to the treatment of investment income such as capital gains and dividends. The report comes as Democrats are trying to raise taxes on the wealthy to help pay for the $3.5 trillion budget bill. Something
Christina,
that they keep negotiating on Capitol
Yeah,
Hill.
certainly busy there in Washington. Back to the Bitcoin. I love that you gave your Twitter handle. Somebody sent me Bitcoin. I wouldn't even know what to do. They're like, okay, now what?
I can't hear anything. So
Okay, Christina, thanks. Well, flight attendants and leaders of airline companies are pleading for help to deal with unruly passengers. A group testified before Congress yesterday, laying out in shocking detail just how bad the situation is on some planes. NBC News correspondent Kristen Dahlgren has the details for us from Burlington International Airport in Vermont. Good morning, Kristen.
Hey, good morning. Yeah, remember that old slogan, fly the friendly skies? Well, those days are long gone. In many cases, the unruly passengers fueled by this, the mask mandate, trying to keep people from spreading COVID. So now the flight attendants are asking the federal government to step in and settle things down.
Passengers fighting in the aisles, even rolling on the floor. out of control, often drunk or angry about mask mandates. This man had to be duct taped to his seat. In a recent survey, 85% of flight attendants said they have witnessed unruly behavior this year.
We simply cannot accept this as the new normal.
In a virtual hearing before Congress, flight attendants described just how ugly it can get.
The specific incident that I will share today is not easy to talk about.
American Airlines flight attendant Teddy Andrews recounting the racist abuse he faced from a passenger refusing to wear a mask.
Please put your mask on. It must be covering both your mouth and nose. He looked at me, and I will not repeat the epithet he used. He said, N-word, I don't have to listen to a damn thing you say. I know I don't deserve to be spoken to like this under any circumstance.
The Federal Aviation Administration reports more than 4,300 cases of unruly, sometimes dangerous behavior in 2021. More than 3,000 of those involve passengers refusing to comply with the FAA mask mandate. Passengers can face jail time and even be banned from an airline for life. Fines of up to $45,000 per incident already total more than $1 million this year. Now flight attendants are calling on Congress for stricter enforcement, bans on to-go cups of alcohol, and greater coordination between the airlines and FAA to spot problem passengers, which could come in the form of a no-fly database.
The vast majority of people just want to follow the rules. They want a safe, uneventful flight. We need messaging from leadership that is consistent about what we're doing together to face this crisis and how we can come together and support each other in this moment.
And while unruly passengers could face jail time, there really aren't a lot of prosecutions in these cases because it's usually left up to local. One thing flight attendants are really asking for is for the Justice Department to step in, perhaps have some federal prosecutions in these cases. And later on today, it will be the airlines speaking to the Hill, trying to offer their side of the story, guys.
I know as a traveler, sometimes I'm finding myself going on a plane and bracing for what I'm about to find. That's never happened before. Kristen, thanks so much. From danger in the skies to danger on the roads and a huge problem of distracted driving. Thousands of Americans die each year from accidents related to distracted drivers. But one top executive at General Motors, who lost his own son, is trying to reverse the trend. NBC News correspondent Tom Costello has the latest on this new campaign.
Yeah, hey, Vicki and Lindsay, good morning. You know, distracted driving remains a huge problem. It hasn't diminished at all, but it's kind of fallen off the national radar. We don't talk about it as much, even though thousands of people are killed every year, including this young man in Michigan. His family has suffered a crushing, heartbreaking loss. And now they want to make distracted driving as taboo, as unconscionable as drinking and driving.
18-year-olds are not supposed to die just 2 weeks after starting college. But Mitchell Kiefer's life came to a sudden, violent end on the Michigan highway 5 years ago this week, leaving his family devastated.
Yeah, just so senseless. Just so senseless.
Mitchell's car was rear-ended by a distracted young driver traveling at 82 miles per hour, catapulting him into an oncoming truck. He died instantly, but it took hours before state troopers could notify the family. Mitchell's younger sister, Juliana, then frantically called her father, who was driving home.
I heard my wife say he died. Jules screamed because I'm not sure she even knew until her mother said that. And then the phone instantly went dead.
The police were still at the home when Steve Kiefer got home.
This officer told me what happened, and I collapsed. He said the words, and I just fell to the ground.
Mitchell, one of roughly 3,000 people who die in distracted driving crashes each year, though many advocates believe the real number is closer to 20,000 or more. Jennifer Smith founded a nonprofit focused on distracted driving after losing her own mother to a distracted driver 13 years ago.
Crashes are preventable. We know what works. That's putting the phone down, focusing on driving. And so now we've got to get that culture to everyone.
Now Smith and Kiefer are joining forces in the fight against distracted driving.
I'm going to prom.
Kiefer is the president of General Motors International and is using his connections and megaphone to get the message out. His own advocacy group, the Kiefer Foundation, works in Mitchell's memory.
Our brother was killed by distracted drivers.
Along with Mitchell's family, some big-name celebrities are also lending their voices.
Hey guys, today we're going to talk about something very serious, distracted driving.
So please, put down your phones, just drive.
Now, the Kiefer Foundation at StopDistractions.org are partnering with the NTSB, launching the National Distracted Driving Coalition. Already, nearly every state bans texting and driving. 24 states and D.C. have also outlawed using handheld phones while driving. Kiefer wants to make distracted driving as socially unacceptable as drunk driving.
And our hope is that with social media, it can happen much faster than it did with alcohol. People will understand that this could very well have been my child. And I just hope that it will encourage people to take action now before it is their child.
Yeah, Steve Kiefer wants this to be a primary offense, a driving offense, where police can pull you over just for having the phone in your hand while you're driving. In most cases, that's not the law right now, but he believes that's the only way to get people to stop texting or TikToking or video chatting or whatever they do. And he's also now got these placards that he's handing out. You can get these online as well. You hold this up out your own window if you see somebody texting and driving, and it says, quite simply, just drive. Put the phone down and drive. Vicki and Lindsay, back to you guys.
I know a lot of us would get an arm workout from doing that, from all the distracted drivers we see. Tom, thanks so much. Coming up, New York's top politicians rolling out the royal red carpet for Harry and Meghan on their first Manhattan visit as private citizens. And some of the tabloids across the pond, well, they're never too pleased, but they're not pleased with their star treatment. We're going to explain next.
Still to come on the Channel 2 News. Well, the waters are certainly receding now. Still too close to call. Westerholt reporting from the ground zero, as it's being referred to. It is, in fact, a taste of freedom. The Haitian people know a little something about resiliency. What's the biggest risk right now? Some of the troops who have been found. I want to welcome you to the first presidential debate. In fact, we've been told we can't go any farther. Here are some resilient folks. Let me get in.
Today's Now a Podcast.
We have what you need to start your day, and it's available every day.
Your daily dose of news and interviews. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
Sometimes the news can be difficult and overwhelming for kids to understand.
Will coronavirus come back next year?
So to help make sense of it all, we've created a newscast just for them. And you know a lot. We hope your family will watch Nightly News Kids Edition.
News is more than a headline. It informs, it inspires, and it still matters. To cover it, you have to be in it. And that's what we're going to do. Every night, we take you to the front lines of the story, where it's actually happening, with NBC News journalists on the ground from all over the world. We cover what you need to know and bring your newsfeed to life. In primetime and streaming live, it's your news playlist every night.
Top Story with Tom Llamas, weeknights at 7 on NBC News Now.
It was a wealthy, idyllic town forced to confront racism, but when the school board presented its plan, it ignited a national firestorm.
Critical race theory.
Racism in reverse. False narrative. Shame.
This is South Lane. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are touring New York City ahead of a big event this weekend in Central Park. They visited One World Trade yesterday, but not everybody's happy about their visit. NBC News correspondent Stephanie Goss joins us now with more. Stephanie, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Lindsay. You know, Harry and Meghan stepped back from their official royal duties, moved to the U.S., said they were looking for privacy. This is their first public trip since they did that, but those merciless British tabloids are not giving them a break. They say they are acting more royal than ever. Harry and Meghan, all smiles in New York City. Their first stop Thursday to One World Trade Center and the 9/11 Memorial, coming less than 2 weeks after the country marked the 20th anniversary of the attacks. Their appearance similar to a trip Harry's grandmother, the Queen, made herself in 2010. But in the UK, the British tabloids are tough critics, accusing them of acting like royalty, even though they are no longer working royals. In an interview with Oprah in March, Harry explained the surprise decision to step away from the monarchy to escape the same intense media scrutiny he blamed for his mother Diana's death.
This constant barrage. My biggest concern was history repeating itself. I'm talking about my mother. When you can see something happening in the same kind of way.
Both Harry and Meghan have been to New York City before, but this marks their first official trip here together. This time, Harry spotted carrying a folder with Archie's Papa emblazoned on it, a nod to his son, though children Archie and Lilibet are not with them on this trip.
The Princess of Wales went on the Concorde.
In 1989, Princess Diana also came to New York, mingling with the rich and famous and visiting the poor.
On a closed visit to the AIDS ward, the princess met and touched many of the children.
That trip has become a key storyline in the hit Netflix show, The Crown.
They desperately need foster parents, but people are too afraid to take them.
Why?
Because of the stigma.
On Saturday, Harry and Meghan will be front and center at Global Citizen Live in Central Park, urging vaccine equity around the world in an effort to help end the pandemic for everyone.
Meghan and Harry, at the end of the day, understand that they are public figures. They understand that anything they do is going to get attention. So they are now learning at this phase, it seems, how to use that public attention and direct it in very specific ways that they see fit, and that the things that they're very passionate about and causes that they want to support.
Global Citizen Live is calling on the G7 nations, Lindsay, to donate 1 billion vaccines to countries that don't have them. It's going to be quite a star-studded event. J-Lo is going to be there, Lizzo, Coldplay, Camila Cabello. If you're looking for something to do on Saturday, maybe Central Park's where you need to go.
There you go. We know Harry and Meghan are big into vaccine equity. Stephanie Goss, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
And that does it for this hour of Morning News Now. The news continues right now.
Breaking news on NBC News Now, supermarket rampage. Police now confirming there were more victims in the shooting at a Tennessee grocery store. The latest on the victims' recovery and what we're now learning about the gunman. Also breaking news, a COVID scare involving Vice President Harris. 2 hosts of the daytime talk show The View test positive for COVID moments before she was set to join them for an interview. The latest, we're learning about what actually happened. Plus booster battle. The CDC director pulls rank and overrules her own advisory panel on who exactly is eligible for a third Pfizer COVID shot. We'll tell you what that could mean for Americans all across the country. And high anxiety. Airlines say they've had it with unruly passengers. Why Congress is now getting involved and what that means the next time you fly. Hi there, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Morgan Radford. Aaron is off today. We start this hour with new revelations in that deadly mass shooting at a grocery store in Tennessee, where police are now confirming that there were, in fact, more victims than first thought. That attack took place at a Kroger supermarket in the town of Collierville Thursday afternoon. The police chief there just revealed the new details in a press conference.
We received information earlier and we were able to confirm that we have the number of shot is 15 now.
NBC News correspondent Von Hilliard is on the ground for us there in Tennessee. Von, first off, what else do we know about how this attack unfolded? And what about the gunman and then really the search for a motive?
Exactly. The motive is still unknown here at this point, or at least not been made aware to us here, other than we have now been told here by the police chief in just the last 30 minutes that this gunman, this 29-year-old man, was in fact a third-party vendor here at this Kroger. Now there's questions because some of these employees have suggested that they knew who this individual was, and he potentially may have been fired or let go from his job yesterday. But exactly what led him to go on a shooting spree is a completely different story. What we do know is that he killed one individual and that 15 others were shot. The good news is that those 15 others, Morgan, are now in stable condition, we are told, though multiple of them are still believed to be at the hospital at this time. But again, this was in broad daylight yesterday afternoon here at a full grocery store. We know that 10 of these individuals were employees, 5 of them were customers, essentially suggesting that this was a rather random firing spree in which this particular individual began to gun down individuals. Morgan, this was a tough scene in which fire, police, as well as those employees and those customers who are in the building are still grappling with what happened.
Can you expound a little bit upon what those employees are saying, Vaughn? Because, I mean, we know that there were people, those Kroger employees, who were actually inside that store when it happened. What are they saying now?
Yeah, several of those employees and customers, they ran into the grocery store freezers. They ran and shielded themselves from wood pallets. Essentially were fleeing the scene to the best of their ability, which the police chief said is exactly what you should do in a situation like this: hide, run, or fight. And he said if it weren't for some of these actions of these individuals, that there could have been more that were dead. But these employees said initially there was one suggested that it sounded like balloons were popping. It was a frenzy there in the scene in the store. But essentially, folks went to go and take cover. There was one employee that literally went up onto the roof of this grocery store. That police chief again said that every single person, he said, this was a community that obviously didn't expect a shooting. At the same time, he said, it's one of those situations where he and his wife have always thought, where is our exit? Look at where the doors are at, and how would we protect ourselves in a situation like this? And when you hear a continuing number of these types of incidents take place, it leads one to think about it for themselves a little bit differently.
And just briefly, Vaughn, before we let you go, what do we know about the person who died?
This was a third-party vendor. This is new information in the last 30 minutes. We know that this was a 29-year-old man here. There was a search warrant that was put out yesterday, and his residency was in fact searched by the FBI and local law enforcement. The local official saying, though, that there was also an individual of interest who was interviewed, but they said at this time they believe this to be an isolated event. Again, though, when it comes to motive, it is not clear. It is also not clear how many weapons were exactly used or how many rounds were fired in this particular incident.
All right, Vaughn Hilliard for us there. Thank you so much. And we're also following breaking news right here in New York. Coronavirus hits a popular daytime talk show while it's on the air, just minutes before Vice President Kamala Harris was set to join the table at The View. Two of their co-hosts were whisked away after testing positive for breakthrough COVID. NBC News White House reporter Monica Alba joins us now. Monica, first off, what do we know? I mean, did the hosts have any prior contact with Vice President Harris before they actually went on set?
I can tell you, Morgan, that according to a White House official, Vice President Harris did not come into contact with the hosts ahead of the show. This was a much promoted interview. She was supposed to be on set for her first studio appearance since taking office. She flew to New York City this morning. She was backstage when this actually unfolded, but we're told she did not come into contact with the two co-hosts who did test positive, learning of their results only mid-show in a very wild live television moment we have for you here. Watch this.
I need the two of you to step off for a second. Okay.
Anna and
we're going to bring
Sunny.
you back later.
What happened is that Sunny and Anna both apparently tested positive for COVID. No matter how hard we try, these things happen. They probably have a breakthrough case, and they'll be okay, I'm sure, because they're both vaccinated up the wazoo. A lot of vaccines.
So the show had to scramble there for several segments, taking commercial breaks, and ultimately they brought the vice president in for a remote interview. She appeared via satellite from elsewhere in the television studios. They talked about this briefly at the top. The vice president said it highlights just how dangerous the vaccine, how dangerous the virus is, but also the efficacy of the vaccine and how important it is to be vaccinated when these breakthrough cases do occur, Morgan. But what's also quite significant here is that there are some questions of close contacts and when people are fully vaccinated. We do know that Vice President Harris did her 2 Moderna doses back in January, but because the Moderna boosters aren't actually approved yet, we know they are for Pfizer today for some subsets of the population, she hasn't been able to get that extra layer of protection. So they are quite careful, and this is something where anyone who really does interact with the Vice President normally would be tested or screened. She undergoes regular testing as well. But this is something the White House is going to closely watch and follow because, as we know, sometimes days after there can still be transmission depending on who else she was around backstage before this all broke.
Monica Alba, thank you so much. I mean, that is an incredible moment to watch happen on live TV. But again, I think you make a good point that because they were vaccinated, hopefully they are feeling well, which is what we all hope. Monica Alba, thank you so much. And another major coronavirus story we're following this hour, a rare rebuke from CDC Director Rochelle Walensky. Now, in a stunning move, she's going against her own advisory panel and is expanding who is now eligible for the Pfizer vaccine booster. We'll take a closer look at just who will get the boosters and when in a moment. But on the heels of this COVID booster, President Biden issued yet another urgent plea to people who are still just hesitant to get it.
Listen to the voices of the unvaccinated Americans who are lying in hospital beds, taking their final breaths, saying, and literally we've seen this on television, if only I'd gotten vaccinated. If only. If only. Please don't let this become your tragedy. Get vaccinated.
But first, some encouraging news in the global race to vaccinate. The latest numbers show more than 6 billion vaccine doses have been administered worldwide to over 3 billion people. NBC News national correspondent Miguel coverage with a closer look at the large-scale booster rollout that's happening in some states today. Hi there, Miguel.
Morgan, the CDC made that amendment overnight saying that frontline workers as well as healthcare workers can now get a booster shot. They'll join millions of other Americans who also qualify for boosters as early as today.
Overnight, healthcare workers becoming the latest Americans to qualify for a booster. In a highly unusual decision, CDC Director Rochelle Walensky overruling one recommendation rejected by a panel of advisors. Walensky saying those frontline workers and others at high risk for catching COVID because of their jobs can now also receive their third dose of Pfizer's vaccine. They join those 65 and over, residents of long-term care facilities, people 50 to 64 years old with underlying conditions, and some Americans 18 to 49 with chronic health problems who can get a booster 6 months after their second dose. Of the roughly 100 million Americans who are fully vaccinated with Pfizer, well over 11 million can now immediately get a booster.
The decision today is critical because it's answering a question all Americans are asking: who should get boosted and when?
After weeks of booster confusion and the initial news they wouldn't qualify, essential workers like Regina Hartley, an elementary school librarian, can now get a shot of added protection.
Sometimes I feel like we can't be our best if we're worrying about, what we might catch from a student in our school or from another teacher.
With over 180 million Americans fully inoculated, there's still no clear booster timeline for adults under 65 vaccinated with Pfizer, or the 45% of Americans inoculated with Moderna or Johnson & Johnson. The staggered rollout of boosters will happen at pharmacies, clinics, and doctors' offices. Some healthcare providers say they're already being pressured to offer doses to those who don't qualify.
Many people are asking why they don't have that opportunity already.
This morning, the battle over boosters still underway, as many seek an extra shot of protection and others face a dose of frustration.
It's still unclear when the vast majority of Americans who are fully vaccinated will qualify for boosters, but health officials insist they remain protected from the virus and especially from hospitalization. Morgan, back to you.
To help us unpack this, let's go ahead and bring in Dr. Julie Morita. She's the vice president of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and the former chief medical officer of the Chicago Department of Public Health. Dr. Morita, thank you so much for joining us. And just to give us a sense of perspective from a public health standpoint, how do you feel about Dr. Walensky's decision to really expand boosters to workers at risk? I mean, what do you think initially was stopping the CDC advisory panel from that expansion in the first place?
Yeah, hi, Morgan. Thanks so much for having me. But yeah, I think it's one thing to keep in mind is that these decisions are difficult decisions. And also to clarify that the CDC is actually the public health authority for the nation. And the advisory committee is an advisory committee to the public health authority. And when the advisory committee makes recommendations, they vote on these decisions, specific questions. And in this particular situation, that question wasn't a straightforward or clear-cut answer or a straightforward answer. The votes were close. And so it was a difficult decision whether or not to broaden to include people based on their occupational risk. And so because of that, there was a difference between what the CDC ultimately recommends and what the advisory committee advises. But I think the key thing from my perspective is the advisory committee is there to advise, but it's ultimately the call of the public health authority.
And give us a sense, Dr. Marita. I mean, we've mentioned that over 6 billion doses have been administered around the world, and that's half of people worldwide. So what does that tell you from your professional experience about the vaccine's effectiveness, and how does it make you feel about really the future of this pandemic?
I think what we know, the data are clear. People who are vaccinated are protected. And so what we're seeing in terms of who's being hospitalized and who's dying in the United States is people who are unvaccinated. And so clearly, in addition to thinking about getting booster doses to those people who have been vaccinated already, we really need to redouble our efforts to vaccinate those people who have not been vaccinated. And all the people who aren't vaccinated right now, not all of them are questioning the value of the vaccines or have concerns about the vaccines. Some of them just haven't been able to access it. And so making sure that all our efforts are focused on making sure that the first doses are getting into people who have not been vaccinated is really important.
All right, Dr. Julie Marita, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for your perspective.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, Gabby Petito's missing fiance is a wanted man. A federal arrest warrant has been issued for Brian Laundrie, but the allegations against the 23-year-old, interestingly, are not directly related to Petito's death. Instead, it's for activities allegedly occurring in the days after, including using an authorized debit card. Meanwhile, the manhunt for Laundrie inside that massive Florida reserve is back underway today. It's now been 10 days since his family says that they last saw him. NBC News correspondent Katie Beck is following all the latest developments from Venice, Florida.
The nationwide search for Brian Laundrie picking up steam. Authorities now armed with a federal warrant for his arrest. The FBI says Laundrie is wanted for use of unauthorized access devices. According to court documents, Laundrie used an unauthorized debit card and PIN number in late August, and knowingly and with intent to defraud, withdrew $1,000 or more from a Wyoming ATM. The Laundrie family's attorney saying in a statement, "It is my understanding that the arrest warrant for Brian Laundrie is related to activities occurring after the death of Gabby Petito and not related to her actual demise." Laundrie's parents were seen Thursday driving away from their home. Their son and Gabby Petito left on a cross-country trip from her parents' home in Long Island, New York on July 2nd. The city of Moab, Utah announced it's launching an independent investigation into the way officers handled this August 12th incident, captured on body cam between Gabby and Brian.
We didn't invite him morning and he would have let me in the car before.
According to an affidavit, the responding officer described it as a mental health crisis, not a domestic assault. The city saying it's unaware of any breach of policy at this time. Laundrie returned home to Florida without Petito September 1st. On Sunday, her body was discovered in a remote area of Wyoming's Bridger-Teton National Forest. The coroner calling it a homicide, but not revealing a cause of death. Laundrie's parents told police their son went for a hike last week at the 25,000-acre Carlton Reserve near their Florida home. Federal, state, and local officials have searched for days using drones, K-9 units, ATVs, and underwater dive teams.
This is a tremendous mass of land. The more people, the more effective.
While the search continues for Laundrie, supporters gather at vigils and growing memorials for Gabby.
It's just heartbreaking. I feel so bad for the family.
We are closely monitoring the Haitian migrant crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border, where dozens are being moved away each day, but thousands are still facing an uncertain future. In fact, 3,100 migrants remain at the Del Rio, Texas camp, and the Department of Homeland Security says that more than 3,100 others are in Border Patrol custody. And as for deportations to Haiti, that number is nearing 1,950. So we want to take a closer look at the challenges for these migrants, really on both sides of the border. NBC News correspondent Juan Venegas joins us now from Ciudad Acuña, Mexico. Guad, where are you first off in relation to the Del Rio camp and what's happening there? What are people telling you about their experiences? And really, what are they ultimately hoping for?
Morning, good afternoon. So we are a couple hundred feet, maybe about 500 feet from the river where the migrants are crossing into the U.S. This is the other makeshift camp, one that was established on the Mexican side. This is a park right near the port of entry that's behind all of these trees you can see. And you have men, you have women, you have families, lots of children playing around. Some of these people were on the American side and they decided to come back to Mexico after hearing that the flights were deporting Haitians back to that country. Others came to Ciudad Acuña and they decided to stay in this camp. Now, there's been a lot of help, lots of aid for them. Some of the Mexican citizens here, people that live in Ciudad Acuña, have brought anything they can to help them out. As you can see, them have tents. Others have been sleeping on the roof of the buildings in this area. And Mexican authorities have surrounded the area. They're guarding the entrance. And since yesterday, they've been trying to convince a lot of the people here to relocate to other parts of Mexico away from the border. Some did leave yesterday, but as you can see, a couple hundred still remains here trying to wait out the deportations. They're telling me that if they wait long enough, maybe there's a chance to cross back into the U.S. After the country stops sending planes to Haiti. So that's what some of them have told me. We did speak to some of these migrants yesterday who told us how they feel.
¿Por qué Haití no como trabajito también? Gobierno, nada más robar dinero a trabajar a otro país. Quédate Haití, nosotros tenemos fuerza para trabajar también.
He says he's got strength. He wants to work. He wants to send a message to the government of Haiti. He says he just wants to work and he wants more help from his government.
Everybody wants to go to USA, but if they can make money here, take care of the family, that's fine. They need a stable status.
So we've been speaking to them yesterday, today. They've been telling us how they feel now. That second man that you saw is Haitian American. He saw what was happening on television and he decided to come all the way from New York to make his way to Mexico, bring supplies and try to offer any help that he can to these migrants that remain in Mexico. So as you can see, they really don't know what they're going to do. They're trying to wait it out with these supplies to see if there's an opportunity to make their way into the U.S. At a later date, Morgan.
Guad, we have to go, but before we do, I just have to ask so that you can kind of give our viewers a sense. Can you explain to our viewers how they are being treated right now at that camp? Because I was in Reynosa, Mexico just last week at a similar camp, and we're hearing stories of the way that they have to protect themselves in the camp because, as you mentioned, women, children, men are all together. Two, can you talk about what they're facing while they're in Mexico? You just heard that man speaking perfect Spanish, and yet many of these Haitians are saying while they are there, people will not rent them apartments, so they cannot leave these camps. Can you explain how they are being treated and why they are fearing for their safety while there?
Right, so we have to understand that there's thousands of Haitians throughout the country. In fact, reports say that hundreds are still crossing from Guatemala into Mexico. So you have Haitians traveling throughout Mexico. I know that you were down in one of the shelters further east from here. That's a different city. We're in Ciudad Acuña. We're a little more west. And then you have other Haitians that are in the border with California and Tijuana. And they've all had different experiences. What I can tell you is after speaking to the migrants here for the past few days, they have all told me that they've gotten a lot of help from the Mexican people in Ciudad Acuña. The food, the water, the clothing, the tents. The people here have helped them in order to be able to survive as they stay in this city. That has been their experience here. Now, we know that there is reports of things that happen to them throughout the country, right? Some of them telling us that they've been robbed. Some of them told me yesterday that there's people that also suffered through other types of crimes in Mexico. But here in Ciudad Acuña, most people in this camp telling me they've had a positive experience, but of course that I don't, that's not always the case when they go to these border towns.
I'm really glad that you gave us that context and how that experience can be different in different parts along the border. Guadalupe, thank you so much for being there. We appreciate you reporting from Ciudad Acuña, Mexico. Thank you. And it took months and months. Coming up, we're going to tell you about the thing that sparked plenty of controversy, the results of the Republican audit of the 2020 election. And therein, not only did they show that President Biden won, but the results also showed he won by an even bigger margin than first reported. We are going to dive right into what that means coming up next.
Still to come on the Channel 2 News. Well, the workers are certainly receding now. Still too close to call. Westerholt reporting from the Ground Zero, as it's being referred to. It is, in fact, a tension created. The Haitian people know a little something about resiliency. What's the biggest risk right now? Some of the troops who have been drowned. I want to welcome you to the first presidential debate. In fact, we've been told we can't go any farther. Here are some resilient folks. Let me get in.
Today is now a podcast.
We have what you need to start your day, and it's available every day.
Your daily dose of news and interviews. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
Sometimes the news can be difficult and overwhelming for kids to understand.
Will coronavirus come back next year?
So to help make sense of it all, we've created a newscast just for them. And you know how we hope your family will watch Nightly News Kids Edition.
News is more than a headline. It informs, it inspires, and it still matters. To cover it, you have to be in it.